Good morning, Lagos. Thank you very much for staying tuned here on Smooth 98.1. It's time for Freshly Pressed 981, where we look through the national news headline in detail with our analyst this morning. We're also enjoying you to send in your messages and be a part of the conversation this morning. And there are various means and platforms you could do so. If you'd like to send us a WhatsApp message, you can send to our WhatsApp number. Please keep and save this number, as this is the Smooth 98.1 WhatsApp channel, 0809-444-0981. That's 0809-444-0981. On Twitter, we're at Smooth 981 FM. Please use the hashtag Freshly Pressed 981. On YouTube, we're streaming live. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Smooth 98.1. Joining us for analysis this morning in the studio, we have Tunde Okufi. Good morning, Tunde.
Morning.
Tunde is our Big Hoofs on Twitter, and with Tunde we have Mr. C. Morning, Mr. C.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Tunde. Good morning, Lagos.
And Mr. C is at Mr. CEEEE, 5 E's on Twitter. Please follow him and ask him why his Twitter handle is Mr. CEEE. All right, let's go on to our stories for this morning. The first one here, Sowore, court threatens imprisonment of SSS Director-General. We have this report from the Premium Times. The Federal High Court, Abuja Division, has issued a warning that it would order the imprisonment of the Director-General of the State Security Service, Yusuf Bichi. Reason why? Because the court had given this warning in response to the failure of the SSS to release the detained publisher of Sahara Reporters, Omoyele Sowore. The court's warning was also based on an application by Mr. Showore's lawyers, led by senior advocate Femi Falana. Mr. C, please can you take us through the story?
Okay, so quick background for anyone who hasn't been following this story. Omoyele Sowore planned to lead some protests, which he tagged a revolution, and he was arrested by the operatives of the State Security Service on the 3rd of August. He was subsequently detained pursuant to ex-parte orders obtained by the SSS. Now, he's been arraigned in court on seven counts for alleged treasonable felony, fraud, and cyber stalking. Now, on the 24th of September, which was Wednesday this week, the Federal High Court Abuja Division granted him bail. His bail application was successful, and subsequent reports clearly indicate that he's satisfied all the bail conditions that were set by the court. Now, for reasons yet to be explained, he's not been released. And this is another reminder, another example of how institutions in this present administration do not obey court orders.
Mr. C, is it just in this present administration or historically for a season we've had courts not, the rule of law not being adhered to strictly? Is it just a characteristic of this present administration?
Okay, it's happened over several administrations, but this is an administration that professes to follow the rule of law.
All right.
Case in point, El Zaki. Reluctantly, he got bail. Dazuki has been granted bail by several courts. He's not been released. Now, it's important that we start to build institutions, because when you read the report, officials of the SSS as reported to have said they're waiting for a directive from the DG. Now, Mr. Femi Falana has taken the right step. He's taken out Form 48, which is a notice of disobedience of court order.
Okay.
And the Federal High Court has made it clear that if its order is not complied with, he's liable to be committed to prison.
Okay.
Now, the big question arises, can he actually be arrested? But that's a different conversation.
Why can he not be arrested?
Who are they going to take? Policemen.
Yeah. You can issue the order,
but can
it be enforced?
Can it be enforced?
Right.
So it's important that the SSS, as a body set up by law, obeys court orders.
All right, Tunde, you want to say something?
No, I was just to comment on what C said about institutions. Look, if we don't have I won't use the word carefully, I was going to say nation, but we don't have a democracy in any case where the rule of law isn't paramount, and especially the place of the courts. I mean, when we have to look, like we very often like to look to the West, look at what happened in the UK. the courts have made and all that. The government might not be pleased or happy with it, but they have to comply. That's the checks and balances that we're talking about. That's about making sure that institutions are stronger and better. But with the way we flout court orders here and judgments, I mean, we're not going anywhere.
All right, thank you very much indeed. We have from WhatsApp JP saying the federal government of Nigeria and DSS arrested Sowore according to the rule of law. Okay, so the rule of law has said release him, but no. Why are they threatening the DG, DSS? Arrest the man and let's move on. Well, Mr. C has explained why it could be a little bit difficult. Let's move on to our next story. Tunde, I'll come to you for this. Cashless policy will deepen financial inclusion, CBN insists. So the Central Bank of Nigeria yesterday reassured Nigerians that the resumed implementation of the cashless policy of the bank is aimed at encouraging and deepening financial inclusion through the use of alternative channels in line with global best practice. Do you agree with this, or share with us your thoughts on this story?
Well, yeah, it is. I agree to a large extent. On the one hand, it will, and it has. Shall I say, it has the potential. It really does have the potential to deepen financial inclusion. By driving in a lot of the cash that is outside of the formal banking sector today, right? Bottom at the base of it, this policy attempts to disincentivize cash, and then obviously encourage things to go through the banking system and more formal channels. So it does have the potential. The challenge, however, is the coherence in all of the policies coming out of CBN. So there's a cashless policy on one hand that's supposed to encourage the use of digital channels,
Yes.
and then on the other hand, there's the expansion of the Stamp Duties Act, which will attempt to take a slice of 50 naira out of every inflow into certain types of accounts, mostly used by merchants and operators, people who would especially be on the retail side anyway of this cashless policy. That alone has a very strong potential to be a disincentive to them accepting payments. So what would happen is this is supposed to encourage people to transact with, like you say, alternate different channels, electronic channels, bottom line. But when the seller or the merchant that you who is offering the service feels that he's going to be charged, he's going to incur additional charges that he wasn't, he would disincentivize the use of that channel. So it's the coherence of the policies. They mentioned global best practice, bringing in, making transactions electronic, financial inclusion. They're absolutely right, but you can't cherry pick. You need to know which. You need to make sure that all your policies are pushing you towards your goal. So that's really the only thing I can say.
Let me talk about financial inclusion for a moment. So when we look at the unbanked in Nigeria, we would say that a number of them are in rural areas. And if we're talking about the cashless policy benefiting or helping the financial inclusion plan, then how will this help them, since a number of them are not, when it comes to using online services, how much do they use this online service? Do they have access to these services?
So access is another thing, and you're right. So the cashless policy is only one half or one part of the many things that the CBN are trying to do. I mean, within this talk that they gave, they also mentioned that look, the central bank has 29 different intervention programs. Okay. For instance, I mean, are you aware of that? I'm sure most people aren't.
A number of people. We only know the ones that
the common ones. Yeah. So you know that there are intervention programs for farming, but beyond farming, really, it's kind of thereafter is not clear. But there are 29 different ones. There's one target at farmers. There's the specific ones at women, youth, all sorts of traders, all sorts of things. But the question is access. How easy is it to actually get access to these facilities and these loans and these programs? But the whole idea for the programs is to bring all these, like you said, people in the unbanked or underbanked parts of the country into the formal banking sector. So through these programs, ideally, if they're dispersing funds to the farmers, they're not giving them cash, or there's a program for women or youth. It's not cash. They're creating some sort of stored value account for you, where you'd have a number and you register and you get onto that ladder of having a formal bank account, and they can track, and that's supposed to help drive economic growth and activity.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Reacting to the earlier story, Jay is saying anybody can be arrested if the presidency is in support. No one is above law. And then Lukman from Bagada says questions should be asked how the banks keep smiling to the bank under Emefiele. Something is wrong somewhere. All of Emefiele's policy seems to benefit the banks first above the consumer. There are very few consumer-centric programs, unlike with former CBN governors. All right, let's go on to another story here. P&ID Contract Scandal. Nigeria secures stay of execution on $9 billion judgment. Premium Times records, would I say, progress in this case? Well, Mr. C, please let us know. So the UK Commercial Court has granted the Nigerian government's application for a stay of execution of a $9 billion judgment debt in favor of the Irish firm P&ID. However, there is a clause, or there's some things attached to it, conditions attached. One is that the Nigerian government, or Nigeria, is to deposit $200 million in the court account within 60 days pending its appeal, or they lose their right to appeal. Mr. C, can you please take us through this story?
Okay, so Lagos, welcome to the latest episode of P&ID season. Now, first things first, the headline is misleading because the headline suggests it was an unconditional stay of execution that was granted, but this is conditional.
Yeah.
So yesterday, arguments were taken on whether Nigeria could apply for a stay of execution pending the hearing of the substantive appeal. And the appeal was granted on conditions. Now, what are those conditions? One, that the Nigerian government paid a sum of $200 million into the court's account within 60 days.
Okay.
And then two, to pay an unidentified sum. In this report, it says it's unidentified. But I've seen other reports which suggest that they're to pay $250 million to P&ID within 14 days.
And that's for legal costs, isn't it?
Yeah, legal
to
costs.
Legal costs.
To cover the interest, because the current interest is $1.2 million every day.
All right.
And the appeal period is supposed to last 108 days. So it comes to about $250 million. And Nigeria has to do that pending the hearing of the appeal. Now, it's instructive to note that at yesterday's hearing, what the events that had transpired in Nigeria the previous week, where in the Federal High Court wound up the Nigerian arm of P&ID and P&ID overseas, none of that was taken before the court. None of that was accepted because the Nigerian lawyer who represented Nigeria, Harry Matovu, Queen's Counsel, and the lawyer for P&ID, and the court agreed that the Nigerian proceedings were totally irrelevant to what was before the court. So here we are. We now know what we have to do. The big question is, will the government pay these sums? Because,
I mean, from this report, it states that the Nigerian government is happy with this judgment. At least they have the opportunity to appeal. So, if they're saying that, it means that they're not loath to pay the sum of money.
the truth of the matter is, they don't have. If we had to pay that sum today, we can't pay it. That's the gospel truth. But I don't know what they're happy about, because the time for putting forth our best case has since passed. So clearly they're privy to details we don't have, and I wish them the very best.
All right, thank you. We'll still definitely keep our eye on this, because at the end of the day, we must remember it's our money that is being paid. So we shouldn't think, oh, it's the federal government's problem. It's our money. All right, let's look at another story here. Now on human rights, we have a report here from Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International and concerned Nigerians have reacted to it, urging the federal government to investigate alleged women detention camp in Maiduguri. Vanguard has this report. So the federal government is set to institute an investigative panel to look into the alleged children and women detention camp in Maiduguri, as reported by Human Rights Watch. And reacting to the report was the chairman Amnesty International, Ibrahim Rafsanjani. Can you please take us through the story and what the reactions are?
So it's a common cycle. I mean, if regular is not the best description, but it is regular in many ways, where the Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International, some other NGO or international agency will say, look, we're falling short of if I to borrow government term from another story, best practice. Again, that's cherry picking, where you say, oh, I'm taking best practice in these areas, but in other areas, and we generally haven't always clothed ourselves in glory, especially as regards to military operations, especially military operations that are within the country, of this nature, that have to do with insurgency, where you're operating within a community. I'll layer this over the recently launched Operation Identify Yourself. Really, and the claim of the Human Rights Watch here is that, look, you've detained, within your detention camps are women and children, right? And the charge against them is that they are involved in Boko Haram activities. But the question is, what efforts have you done to, one, validate and verify your claims, and instead of just holding them in detention, which is what it turns out to be, because it can also be an administrative thing, which is something we fall victim to a lot. So they say these guys are involved in Boko Haram, we gather them and then we just leave them there. There should be a recognition that these are women and children, and they should be processed quickly, as opposed to just holding them.
Should they even hold children, actually?
Well, it depends on the length. Do you understand? Which is, quickly processing and then putting them, recognizing that they're children, and putting them in appropriate facilities. So this requires a whole infrastructure. We're not the only ones that have had issues with internal insurgency, or issues of this type. But what happens is that they create infrastructure, and by infrastructure I mean places and institutions where children can be taken to, if they have been radicalized, to de-radicalize them. And it's a program of education, a new way of life, instruction and rehabilitation. But where that is absent, then, which is essentially what Human Rights Watch is trying to say, it's beyond just the military, really. We need to have a proper program, or else if you say don't hold these guys, you let them out, if they are indeed involved with facilitating program in any way, they'll soon be picked up again. So it's a holistic approach, and it's that holistic approach that is missing. Right? That's what we're not taking into account, because realize that if these guys are, let's say they're not in, because they haven't been charged. Let's say they're not involved with Boko Haram. I can guarantee that the conditions under which they will be held has the potential to radicalize them and say, look, the government isn't helping me, or the government, Boko Haram, or where you mix women and children that have no inclination towards Boko Haram with a few people who are actually Boko Haram operatives, then it's bottom line, it's a ready ground for converts and conversion into the cause.
And thank you so much for that point. Really important. Akenkugbe A on WhatsApp says this cashless policy is fraudulent. As a filling station owner who makes daily deposits of over 6 million naira into my corporate account, I get charged about 94,000 naira on every deposit above 3 million naira, irrespective of which other accounts paid into cause of BVN link. So a number of people have complained, have echoed Akenkugbe's sentiment. Unfortunately, I can't go through each of them.
I agree. So in implementation, they should do the same way. So if you look at digital payments, like card payments, you describe maybe as a merchant, there are different tariffs and different, when I say the different tariffs and different things, that apply to different sectors and segments. So there's a recognition that the fuel business is slightly different from the rest. So for instance, when you pay with your card, the operator of the fuel station isn't paying him, a service charge for that transaction, right? Because there's a recognition of that space. They should do something similar for the cash policy. Say, okay, by and large, fuel stations will have to deal with a lot of cash. Perhaps there would be, maybe there should be different thresholds.
So special sectors, some sectors given special status.
Exactly. Perhaps, while because it's holistic. While instead of punishing the business, it's something that needs to change. You need to get more people, willing to transact with electronic channels. You need to have more people with cards, USSD, all sorts of alternatives. Because if the large majority, if 80% of the people who turn up to the fuel station come with cash, you can't turn them back.
Yes, you can.
And you can't just penalize them because, so it's holistic again. And I think they should have something, for certain sectors and say it's, it's not just.
All right. Thank you very much. Going away from the Human Rights Watch report, let's look at another report from this time from PricewaterhouseCoopers. So federal government spent 2.3 trillion naira on oil, electricity subsidies in 4 years. That word is back again in the news, subsidy. Let's talk about that, Mr. Singh.
Never went away.
Just
call it different things.
Let's talk, Mr. C. What's your take on this story, please?
Yes, it's very disturbing. Now, in just 4 years, we need to remember this is 2015 to 2018. A total sum of 2.3 trillion has been spent subsidizing the consumption of petrol and electricity. Now, to break down that 2.3 trillion, 1.2 trillion was spent on subsidizing petrol consumption, which is now called under recovery.
Under recovery.
Under recovery.
Thank you. And then 1.12 trillion was spent on power subsidies. Now, it's interesting to note that the sum of 1.12 trillion over the 4-year period will totally cover the current budget for health and education. Very instructive. And that this 2.3 trillion currently represents 17% of today's foreign reserves, and then 26% of the 2019 budget. The truth of the matter is we cannot continue this way. It is not sustainable long term. And it is disturbing that we haven't found a way around this, because it's electricity tariffs in Nigeria are not realistic. That is why the discos have steadily made losses from 2013 till date. As of 2017, the discos owed 417 billion naira. As we speak, 11 of the 17 discos are technically insolvent. Something has to give.
So just very quickly, I mean, we wheel out these figures, we talk about the issues that we have, but what are the solutions? What can be done? There's been an age-long debate on subsidy. Should it be removed? Should it remain? But I like how you've broken it down, talking about what this money could have been used for if it hadn't been used for subsidy. So what's the solution?
Well, the solution is this: as painful as it is, remove the subsidies on petrol and electricity. Nigerians will pay more if they're going to be guaranteed regular and constant light. Luckily, the tariffs are going up from next year. But in the interim period, something has to give. Now, when you take petrol, we're surrounded by countries. The average price of petrol in all the countries around us is at least $1.
That's about 360 naira.
Yeah. Now, Nigeria is 145. We're joking.
There's an incentive.
Because there's a clear incentive to truck petrol received here out.
It's a small goal.
All right. Just to wrap up very quickly. Just this week, there was a report by the customs of the Nigerian government that when the border was closed down, petrol consumption went down.
It's a huge indication.
Huge indication that petrol is being smuggled out. So we have to bite the bullet now, remove the subsidies, tighten our belts, and get through this difficult phase, and then things will get better.
Thank you very much. So big question to our listeners: would you be willing to have subsidy removed from petrol and on electricity?
The big issue is that it's not that subsidy in and of itself is bad, but the truth is we take things like security. We have a real issue. We're trying to fix it, but then our political class and everyone else just exploits that. Right, it's the exploitation of subsidy. Look at what subsidy figures were in when we returned to democracy in Obasanjo's years, and look at how it skyrocketed. It blew out of proportion at a certain point in time because people started to abuse it. That's the issue now. And we haven't even spoken about how much. The story doesn't even talk about how much we spend to subsidize and defend the naira.
Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to Punchy Newspaper for this next one. Politicians without other livelihoods will be corrupt. And this is coming from the former interim national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Chief Bisi Akande. He's talked about the fact that he's compared how politicians were in the past during his heydays, if I put it that way, and what it obtains today, where they don't have a second source of income. And for some people, politics has become a profession. Can you take us through this story?
Okay, so there's nothing wrong with politics being a profession, and I wouldn't exactly agree that politicians who have a second means of income will be corrupt, because if you're a politician, that means you're in public office and you're in public service. I don't want you having a second stream of income, because then you're not focused on the mandate that the people have given you. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So while you're in politics, you should put your second stream of income or whatever aside. Now, but I understand what he's saying.
I just want to ask, how about the call for representatives, for instance, senators, representatives to go part-time? So some people have said that they should go part-time.
Our country is too big. Not Nigeria. So, I mean, for a population of 200 million, 2 million people, 1.8, yes. Okay. But not us, right? We need full-time focused guys. Now, the issue is not because they don't have a second stream of income or career politicians. And I prefer that they be career politicians. It is also good for people from the private sector who've run and built stuff to move into public service, because they come with all that experience and credibility. Even though the few or the one or two that have done that have embarrassed that whole concept greatly. So it's beyond. The key thing is the credibility, right? We too often don't pick the best. We don't promote the best. It's not a merit-based system, so we promote mediocrity. We need to pick people who have a proven track record of being able to deliver on things, and a proven track record in their credibility, right? So people who are honest, who at least have demonstrated, high levels of personal integrity, right? Who have run and done, who've been a success in their lives in some other way before presenting themselves up for public office. That's what we need. Not saying that, if a politician doesn't have any other source of income, then he's liable to be corrupt. There are many nations that have career politicians. They come out of school saying, look, I want to be a politician. Because politics, many would argue, if you speak to political scientists, they would argue that, and in many ways you have to agree, that political science is the most important discipline. Because regardless of what your discipline is in life, whether you're a scientist, whatever it is that you do, if you don't have the politics on side, if you don't have the politician on side, they will affect whatever. Politics affects every other sphere of life. So there's nothing wrong with people being career politicians. What we're lacking is institutions. What we're lacking is controls. So when you get into office, there is nothing preventing you from stealing.
Thank you very much indeed. We have Iwoma on YouTube saying, why would I pay more for bad service? IKDC wrongfully disconnected our line, and we've been trying to get them to reconnect us for 2 weeks, and we don't owe any bills. So again, responding to that question as to, would you mind it being subsidized and you paying the full amount? And people are complaining that, well, at the moment it's not even working. Let's move on to Guardian newspaper for this next story. APC governors, others, say no cracks in presidency. So according to this report from the Guardian newspaper, they've mentioned that despite rumors around talking about the state of, or the relationship at government level in presidency, that there's nothing to be worried about. They deny that there is a crack in the presidency, as believed in some quarters. Also, the governors on the platform of the party said there was no iota of truth in the insinuation that cabals, in quotes, in the presidency had perfected plans to slam corruption charges against the VP Yemi Osinbajo and subsequently impeaching. Mr. C, please take us through the story.
This is turning out to be a very interesting soap opera, and every day there are new twists and developments. So, what I find instructive about this story is the people who've come out to say there's no crack. None of them is in the presidency. The APC governors. They only go to the presidency for meetings. They don't stay there. Now, there have been reports that he's fraud of about 90 billion. That money was given to the VP reportedly by the FIS chairman, 90 billion for campaign purposes. And the VP has indicated that he's ready to waive his immunity to sue the people who peddled the alleged falsehood. Now, the governors say there's no crack and that all is well, that the VP has gone to represent the president on some assignments outside the country. Now, what is instructive to notice None of the spokesmen for the presidency has come out to say that the VP is innocent. Contrast that with when a certain governor in the north was allegedly videotaped stuffing himself with dollar notes. Our dear own president came out to say that he wasn't sure about the integrity of the video. That was a state governor. Now this is his vice that he supposedly picked, and he's been very quiet. Then,
I mean, would you say it's because the VP is defending himself in his own right? Sufficiently, so there's no need for him to speak up.
No, my point is this: if he found it reasonable or necessary to defend a state governor, then more importantly, there have been certain developments that, when you start adding them up together, suggest that something is amiss. But it's still too early to clearly state that this is what is going to happen. So we will watch this unfolding story and then see what happens.
Because they're a team, really. They're a team.
The presidency is one, so he should come out to defend his VP.
All right, thank you so much. Chinka on WhatsApp says, believing politics is a career is the main reason we have those we have. Outside politics, these guys are unemployable because they have nothing. Okay,
that's the issue, because you take them, you take people who are unemployable. Don't take people who are unemployable. There's nothing wrong with having career politicians. Just don't, we've always picked people who are unemployable elsewhere. All
right, Funke from McCarthy said, Nigerians do not want subsidy removed or anything. We want the good life. We don't want to pay for it. And then Femi from Lagos says, your argument that subsidy should be scrapped to curb smuggling is counterproductive. Have you checked the price trend for petrol in these countries over the years? Every time there is an increase in Nigeria, it multiplies the prices in these countries. And then Chika Gina from Marina, final comment here. The APC governor can deny any rift between the president and his vice. If this be the case, why is Bakari's name popping up as the replacement for the right? So these are just speculations, and we must be careful so that we're not basing our debate or argument on speculation. But thank you so much indeed for your comments. Thank you to our analysts. Thank you Tunde Okufi at Big Coops on Twitter, and Mr. C at Mr. CEEE on Twitter as well. Thank you to all our listeners. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for being a part of the show on the conversation this morning. At 8:15, the locker room with Tega will be here with sports analysis from all over the world. Good morning.
Morning.
Sorry, I hadn't even. The number 5 story was important. I hadn't read it.
Oh, okay, that, yeah.
When I